questions, my friend, is money. If you watch the Olympics in the United States, every other commercial was another pharmaceutical drug. Every other bloody commercial was another pharmaceutical drug. That's why they would much rather you take that than something that they don't get any money off of. Now, that may be a very jaded and cynical view, but, prove me wrong, IOC. Why is it that half the commercials that you air on the American broadcast are all for pharmaceutical companies? Why is that?
Well, they're getting paid for sure.
Paid, absolutely.
Yeah. Isn't I don't know if this is one of those TikToks that you see and you don't never see it again. A guy said the Olympics are a scam. I think scam is a strong word, but he said that the only ones profiting from it are the organizers. The athletes are not getting anything. They're maybe getting gold medals which they can take home if they're very good at it. Otherwise, no, nothing. The countries where the Olympics are hosted are more often than not left with those white elephants, right? Those big empty stadiums that are never used afterwards. So I would like to ask you, Dr. Hutchison, is the Olympics a big scam?
I'm not going to put myself in a position of being sued by the IOC and saying that it's a big scam. However, I'm not going to not say it either. Here's where I would go with this. Mm-hmm. If we look at the countries, so let's go straight to China. So China had 21 athletes, at least maybe it was 23, between those two numbers, who tested positive for a banned substance prior to the Tokyo Olympics, and there was no punishment, and they kept it absolutely quiet until very recently that came out. Now, all of those athletes were allowed to compete. Some of them were on the swim team this most previous Olympics in Paris, and you have to ask the question, why? Why did they get to compete, but Sha'Carri Richardson was banned? If there's one thing that the IOC loves is to put on a games in a totalitarian dictatorship country. Because in that case, they don't have to worry about the mayor of Paris insisting that the swimming takes place in the Seine. They don't have to worry about the food not being what the athletes want. They don't have to worry about cardboard beds and nonsense like that. All those things happen in a democracy. Now, I'm very much for democracy, but when it comes to organizing a massive event like the Olympics, what you want is one person telling everybody what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen, and they deliver like that. Okay, so China and Russia are two of the favorite countries for the IOC to host their Olympics because they do it on time and they do it perfectly, and they pay a huge amount of money to the IOC. Now, let's go back to your point of athletes don't get paid. This is an enormous part of my book. Athletes do not get paid for their performances at the Olympic Games. If they win a gold medal in the United States, or any other medal for that matter, they have to pay federal taxes on the value of that medal once they get home.
You're fucking shitting me.
I'm kidding. It's 100% true.
Oh my God.
It's real. Now, what is the Olympics? It is a television program that needs viewers. And what are we tuning in to view? We're tuning in to view the athletes. The athletes are the product on the field, and they get nothing. In most instances, those athletes have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to keep the food on the table and allow themselves to train for the next Olympic cycle. We saw this with the women's water polo team. They were desperate for funding, and one of my favorite rappers, Flavor Flav, sponsored the team. That's ridiculous. We shouldn't have to do that. The IOC should be paying the athletes to show up, paying the athletes to compete, and you should get bonuses when you win an event. But that's not what happens. All that money goes to a very small cabal of very, very wealthy, old, mostly white men in Europe. That is just criminal, in my opinion. And so I'm going to move on to a distinction I'm going to make between international athletics and domestic athletics within the United States. So in the United States, we have 4 big leagues. We have the NFL, National Football League. We have Major League Baseball, the National Basketball Association, and the National Hockey League. And in all 4 of those leagues, we have unions that the athletes are members of. And they negotiate with ownership about pay, about time off, and also about which drugs will be tested for and what the punishments will be thereafter. The punishments for failing a drug test in the domestic American sports leagues is significantly less punitive than on the international scene. Now, what does the international scene have? Zero athlete representation, nothing. So a big part of my book is suggesting that the athletes who compete on the international scene must unionize to negotiate with the IOC or their own sports governing bodies for better pay or any pay at all, for health benefits after their careers are done, and then also how punitive they're going to be when it comes to drug testing. Now, I was asked this question by another one of the podcasts I was on recently, and he asked me, Dr. Hutchison, what if the athletes in a particular sport say they want to keep all the drug testing the exact same? Fine. Now they have a voice. And if that is what they vote, then I will keep my mouth shut because that is what they elected to do. But I would hope that they would negotiate some better pay and some better healthcare benefits for the duration of their life after they've given so much for my viewing benefit. And I will get off my soapbox at that point.
I see. And in order to achieve that, the best way, in your opinion, would be to unionize.
Absolutely. Okay. Unions are the key to everything. There was decades worth of history where athletes had zero say over what they could do with their own careers. There was no such thing as a free agent in any of American sports until around the 70s, when they finally were able to come up with the ability to move from one team to another and negotiate their own salaries. If you were drafted by a particular team, they owned you. You were, I'm not going to use the word slave, but an indentured servant, let's say that. And the only way that you could get out of it was by leaving the sport altogether. That changed over time. And we saw the benefits of that in terms of not just for the athletes, but for the game itself. It improved dramatically once that happened. The same thing is going to be true when we take care of athletes on the international scene. I can tell you on our end, since we don't have a ministry of sport like you do in most Western countries, or actually most countries around the world, there is no money for athletes to train. There's a small amount that the US OC gives to athletes to help them train along, but it's a paltry sum. And we need to do better by our athletes. It's just not fair. It's simply not fair.
Of course. I mean, they're the soul of the whole thing.
They're the product.
Yeah, they're the product. So since we're talking about the Olympics, before going live, we shortly mentioned this case where a transgender athlete won, and apparently there was a huge scandal around it. I didn't follow the whole story through very, very well. I would like to know if you did. And if you could explain a little bit better for us.
So the two athletes that I'm aware of were both boxers, and they're not transgender. So let me just define this. If you have a transgender person, they're born with one gender. The terminology that we use is gender they were assigned, which I don't agree with because no one assigns anything. You're born